Hi, and welcome to Creating a Culture for Mid-Level Success. I'm Jeff Schreifels, Senior Partner at Veritas Group, and I've been working in the nonprofit sector for over 30 years, and I'm really looking forward to being with you today. Now, today we're going to be discussing the key principles that you must have to create a culture that is donor-centered. We'll also be talking about what your donors need and expect. And maybe most importantly, we will cover how to set the right boundaries with your donors. Now, think back for a moment about a donor meeting you've been in where you or someone else was just talking on and on and on about your organization's programs without considering the donor at all. This is an organization-centered approach, and unfortunately, we find that most organizations are focused on themselves. When an organization is focused on what they are doing, it's not good for building authentic donor relationships. It's not good for fundraising, and it's not good for the communities you serve. When building a culture of philanthropy, your job is to understand your donors' passion and interests and connect that in a meaningful way to the good work your organization is doing. Remember, you are the bridge between the donor and all of your great programs. When we define being donor-centered, that is what we mean. You should be focused on the donor relationship. However, your donors should never be the drivers of what programs or solutions you establish. Those should be developed in partnership with the community you're serving, with the support of experts, and with your staff who are leading these programs every day. Organizations that have successfully built a thriving culture are grounded in creating meaningful relationships with their donors that connect them to the people who are on the ground, doing the work to address the needs in your community. Tuning into your donors throughout your relationship with them so you are aligned with their interest, reporting on their impact, and respecting them as a partner are really at the core of a donor-centered approach. And celebrating is a big part of that. Think about your own response to gratitude for a moment. Receiving thanks or acknowledgement for something you've done really makes you feel good. It also doesn't last very long. The same is true for your donor. You need to regularly show gratitude and impact with your donor and show how their gift is really making a difference. And don't forget that this is also important internally at your organization. Having a culture of philanthropy that everyone at your organization is committed to means sharing with program staff what's happening with your donors so that they are included in the celebration. It also means celebrating stories with donors that honor those who serve your incredible program team. Celebrating is a wonderful way to make donors feel part of the family. Authentic and purposeful storytelling is also a significant and important part of creating the right culture. Storytelling needs to be a two-way conversation with your donors, and your whole organization needs to understand and know your story. We recommend taking some time to go through an exercise of writing out your story and placing it in prominent places within your space and hiring or onboarding process. Look for opportunities to regularly tell your story, both internally and externally. And I challenge you to see if you can create your story with as little of your organization in it as possible, because the story isn't really about your organization. It's about the need you are working to solve, and your donors are part of that solution. This may sound pretty obvious, but you have to remember that donors are real people with real lives that impact them. They have jobs, marriages, children, hobbies, stresses, and interests just like we do. It can sometimes be easy to lose sight of that in the day-to-day work. So be mindful and understanding of your donors. Let's talk for a moment about giving. There can be some stigmas around the idea of philanthropy that make it seem like nonprofits are taking money from donors or begging for gifts. Neither of those are true. And it's important to have the right perspective in your work with donors. In fact, giving gives the donor the power to transform lives and make an impact on something that is outside of themselves. And your role is critical and helping the donor achieve this. Your donors want to help solve a problem and make a difference in an area that they're passionate about. They also expect partnership, transparency, honesty, and clear communication about the outcomes of their gift. If you aren't showing your donor how she's making a difference, then the data shows that your donor is likely going to stop or reduce giving to your organization. It's up to you to effectively manage your donor's expectation. That means being clear about what they can expect for updates on their gifts, how their gifts is going to be used, and any promises you've made to the donor. Consider for a moment a donor on your caseload that you may be worried about. Maybe you didn't correctly set expectations or expectations need to be adjusted. Take some time to think through these questions to evaluate what expectations were made, what the reality is, and how you need to proceed. This all comes down to the fact that to build trust, you need to do the right thing. And when you don't, you need to admit it. Donors will appreciate and respect you for being honest and transparent with them. We've all had situations where our expectations were unmet. It's how you handle that situation that will have the greatest impact on your donor relationship moving forward. One of the most challenging topics when it comes to managing donor relationships is how to maintain the line between healthy and unhealthy relationships. As opportunities for connecting digitally are becoming more common, this line can be especially hard to navigate. This topic can really be summed up by these points. If you need to say no, then say it. Be clear about why you are saying no, and don't feel bad for doing it, but be kind throughout the experience. It's important to note that there's a big difference between situations where you need to hold the line on boundaries and inappropriate behavior from a donor. As much as you can, you need to avoid putting yourself in a situation that could become inappropriate or challenging. But as we all know, that won't eliminate the potential for behavior that's just unacceptable. We've heard stories of fundraisers receiving inappropriate text, being put in uncomfortable situations when meeting with donors, or dealing with sexual harassment from a donor. And if that happens, we highly recommend that you reiterate clear boundaries and immediately report the situation upline to your supervisor. You may also decide to involve your HR department. Once reported, you and your supervisor should devise next steps that will address the behavior and ensure your safety. Thank you all for joining me today as we discussed how to create a culture of philanthropy that will support your success in mid-level, how to effectively manage donor expectations from a place of honesty and transparency, and how to create healthy boundaries in your interaction with donors. If you haven't already, I recommend following our blog and podcast to hear more from Veritas Group. Thank you and take care.